Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerd Steve. Today I'm joined by this fine nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted, how are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Excellent. Ready to talk about some D&D ideas? We're going to be talking about failures. I was waffling back and forth whether we should call it the failures or defeats. They're both valid, and they can actually be integral parts of your game and also life.
Indeed. So I want to first off, start off, and this has nothing to do with the concept of failure. It just happens to be, a pertinent, standpoint in the D&D space right now. So, my heart goes out in solidarity to all those who were Hasbro or Watts that have, been laid off this past week. It's definitely a tough time, in life for those who are seeking work, like yours truly. So I definitely understand how you're feeling because I'm going through it too. I've been on the job hunt for about 2 months, and it's kind of sucks. And now there's like 1,100 more people out there that are going to be fighting for jobs.
Yes, for the right price, a Nerdarchist tag can do things for you.
So but I just wanted to put that out there because we care about those that are a part of this awesome hobby.
Yeah,
And
during the last, Wizards of the Coast, kerfluffle, I'll just reiterate what I've said then, and that is evil corporations are going to evil corporate. You can't really expect much else. They lay
right,
people up off, and their shares go up in the company. It's just the way it works. Although this isn't really a video about that per se. And I agree with Ted. For those people that have lost their jobs, our condolences and good luck in going forward in the future. Ted does
so
not work for Wizards now,
no,
nor
no,
has he
I
ever.
have not. Well, when I did lose my job 2 months ago, I did apply for a position,
Mm.
but
Funny enough,
I was turned down.
the position Nerdarchist Ted applied for was someone else got. They never actually started, and they got laid off before the position even went anywhere. So you dodged the bullet, my friend.
That is entirely true. But so today we're going to talk about D&D ideas failures. And there's so many aspects within, D&D and RPGs in general that like the term failure or defeat just assumes like, all right, that is the worst possible outcome and it's never going to bring the story forward. And yet in other games, the concept of failure is how you actually earn XP. So like the Powered by the Apocalypse games, when you fail at something, you learn and that's how you get better. Where at D&D, you only tend to get things through success. So I kind of find that that's a an interesting dichotomy in the rule set, creation.
Yeah, D&D is a pass fail system for the most part, with very few gradation, in between. And honestly, like one of the reasons why we're doing this stream, and we're inspired to talk about the topic of failure, and we are going to absolutely talk about how to use failure and defeat in your D&D games and other RPGs as well. But we just completed a Kickstarter for our Zoo Mafia RPG, which did not cross the finish line. We hit about 60% or so. No, it was more higher than 60%, I think. But
We
we
were
were at
closing on 75.
yeah, we were at 9,000
Six,
out of
sorry, 66.
we were at 9,000 out of 15,000, so it was not successful. We were going to relaunch it early next year. Um, there was a bunch of people that are interested, and we're still interested in making it. There's a link down in the description to sign up to get notified when that Kickstarter launches. But also, like that game, one of the reasons why we were inspired to use the Powered by the Apocalypse system is because, in a kind of a weird way, you get rewarded for failure in that system. If you fail at a test, you gain XP. Eventually, you gain enough XP, you can increase your powers or get new abilities. And we kind of like that idea. And also, it's not just that the system itself, has that built into it where you can have success even though you fail, but also like that gradation of success. It's not, there's no absolutes. Another game that we really enjoyed playing that had that aspect to it was Star Wars games with the narrative dice. Like, you could not succeed at the task, but have some like really cool things happen just because of the way the dice land, or you could succeed at the task and have some horrendous things also happen just because of the way the dice land.
I really do love the Star Wars RPG dice system. It is very complex and almost unwieldy the first time you're rolling the dice. If you've got a large pool, it's like, all right, how do I interpret this?
How do
So
you
for a
build the
new
pool
game
first
master,
off?
well,
You
sure.
know?
So it is a little bit, hard to get going, but once you've learned how those systems kind of function, it's like, all right, well, I can put forth some ideas here, with Zoo Mafia and Powered by the Apocalypse. You generally have failure, success with consequence, success, or a critical, so something beyond better, or beyond success. So there's not a whole lot to narrate. When you've got success with consequence, in our games, we sometimes like to just, offer some choice. Do you want to have this as a consequence, or do you want to have this? Sometimes it's just like, nope, you're taking extra damage, or this other thing happens. So success with consequence allows you to have a little bit of failure at the same time as success. The story gets to kind of be slightly twisted as to what's going on. And sometimes these extra failures, if you will, wind up taking the story in a direction that you weren't really thinking about at the time. And it's a really cool idea. So you run with it, either as the player or as the DM. And we've had some really cool things happen on the stream, with Zoo Mafia, that has actually changed, some of the narration, where some of the story went, because it's like, all right, well, this character is now, this NPC is now gone, or this other element that could really take the story in a whole new direction was just created. This is where you can insert NPCs that aren't a part of the mafia life, and now, oh crap, they're in the middle of it, so they're gonna get hurt, they're gonna get killed, or they're gonna see the craziness that you're actually up to. So like these kind of elements are fun, that don't typically have it happen in D&D through the narration of the dice. The DM just has to be like, well, I'm going to place this piece here. So it's fun that those failure elements can come out narratively as part of the dice rolling, as opposed to just insertion in the story.
Yeah. Also, our groups tend to be full of chaos monkeys. So, like,
Sure.
when the GM offers, us a choice, and we're like, "Oh, that's going to be terrible, but interesting," our players are very much likely to go with the terrible but interesting thing, over damage mitigation.
Sure.
Now, when I think of like games like D&D, and I think of defeat or failure, I feel like it comes about in two different varieties, right?
Sure.
One is through gameplay, and the players just they don't succeed at what they're trying to do. Whether it's negotiating with the king, overcoming an obstacle, or being victorious in a combat. The other is where the DM tries to plan in a failure because it's part of their story arc that they have.
Yep. I know where you're going with this.
And there's several ways of doing it, but most of them are bad.
Right.
And it's in of itself, it's not bad, right? But it's just how you do it. But so
Right.
first of all, let's start with what happens when the players fail in the game. What does that mean? In a game like D&D, a lot of times it can mean that their characters get wiped. They all die, right? Because you're in combat and that's what happens. But is that what has to happen, right? Why is that the only outcome? Are there other
So
possibilities?
So I want to break this down into all three pillars. So you're talking about combat. So if you're looking at combat, I look at, there's several options when it comes to uh failure, defeated in combat. Number one, you're absolutely right. Total TPK, the party is wiped. it could be a situation where the party is defeated, but they have enough wherewithal to realize that this is an unsurmountable foe, or the cards are stacked against them, and they have to retreat. They withdraw. They run away. Well, call it what you will. Now it's a regroup phase, and you got to do whatever. It could very well be they're all dropped, but they're left for dead. The DM glosses over death saving throws and, just, okay, you guys come to in 1d4 hours later. Maybe some of your stuff is taken. Maybe the important, MacGuffin that you're working with, is no longer on your person. And, now you got to
real quick,
start the search all over.
I want
again.
to interject something that actually kind of makes that more interesting.
Sure.
And I believe it's Goblin Katie was telling me in one of the games that they play in, they don't roll their death saves. They throw it to the GM to roll their death saves, and nobody knows what they are, or if Katie the player does, she doesn't tell anybody.
Okay.
I've also heard of I think other GMs doing blind death saves. I feel like it was maybe Mike Gould. If it wasn't specifically for death saves, he definitely uses this technique. But I think talking about death saves too, where he'll hold the dice tray up high and let them drop the die in so that he can see what it is and they can't.
Okay.
And then he kind of records it, right? Like, so there's two reasons why you might do something like that. One is it would just add drama and tension to when characters get dropped. Now it's just a resource they manage, right? In most games,
sure.
Like, I have one past death save. I have one failed death save, whatever it is, and then like they mitigate like their actions and how much time they had to do things. But now, if you don't know, was a one rolled on that initial death save? The only time you ever truly know
is if you roll a 20.
If you roll a 20, maybe if they stabilize, the DM might give them like, they seem to be stable. But they're unconscious, right? Like maybe you give them something for that. But the other thing,
I do really like that concept of the party not being aware, because unless you're there at the person's side, making a medicine check, using a healer's kit, or casting, spare the dying, you really have no way of knowing are they inching closer to death or are they not. But you were saying,
yeah. And then the other thing is just like, as the DM, if you're a DM that fudges rolls, you could fudge the rolls in their favor. I would hope you wouldn't fudge the rolls against them to murder their characters. But the option is there.
The option is indeed there if you're looking to, ramp up tension in a way that, is kind of sour grapes. But that's just, my opinion. And of course, the last option is, you're all dropped, you failed, but you're taken captive. So in 3 out of the 4 options, 75% of the story elements of failure, the story can succeed in some way, shape, or form. Just the narrative has been chosen. Now, Dave and I have been both playing D&D for over 30 years apiece. We've been playing together for more than 20 years, if I, completely remember correctly, maybe even more than 25. But it's a scenario where like I can only recall one. Well, I guess you say 2 TPKs that have happened like in its entirety. And I'm saying one of them because like the wizard was stuck in a sepia snake sigil, and he's got max of 15 hit points, so I don't think he's getting out of the tower alive. But everybody else was kind of wiped. And in both instances, it was utter defeat. We failed at what we were doing. But one was like our very first campaign that Dave ran. The other one, also Dave's campaign, we were just ignoring every single hint that the DM was putting down. But we were all like, the players were pushing forward. It was late. It was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We've been gaming for over 9 hours, and we're like, no, let's go, keep going, keep going, keep going. And we pushed too far, and we got to a place we really shouldn't have been. And like, all right, campaign's over. You guys are all dead. It's like, well, yeah. But every other campaign that I've been in, we've either completed a story, retired the characters, or just ended the campaign and moved on to something else. So like, for 30 years, that's not a whole lot of ultimate failures, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think there should be more opportunities for the players to fail in a way that is interesting. It's not just about having them fail, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes you can progress the story, in far more interesting ways by not killing the players. Obviously, that kills the story, but maybe it goes in different directions. Now they're prisoners; they have to figure out how to escape, or you know they've been banished from this plane to someplace else. Or they've in order to gain their freedom, they've been tasked with another quest. Or maybe they end up like super close to the big bad, and they get to kind of interact with them in a way they wouldn't have, and maybe it makes them question some of their preconceived notions. Like, yeah, they are the bad guy, it's clear, but like once you start learning about them, learning why they're the bad guy, right? Maybe they're a sympathetic bad guy at that point. Maybe the players don't want to just defeat them, but help them solve this problem in a more constructive way, as far as they're concerned. Like, there's definitely room to grow from those scenarios than just, oh, you're dead, right? Even if they're fighting like a mindless creature, right, and they're defeated, they all go down, and normally I would say, well, they're wolves or whatever they are. They're just going to eat them. That's what they would do. But in the meantime, something happens. Something drives them off, right? A rock, like a rock, drives them off and scoops up all the players, and they come to consciousness, surrounded by giant rock eggs that are about to hatch or that have just recently hatched, and there's the hatchlings in the nest, and they were brought to be food for these hatchlings, right? So the adventure can go in a different, unexpected direction.
Yeah, the element of moving the failure into adding just a new complication. All right, perhaps the wolves are going to drag them back. Maybe there's a druid that's controlling the wolves, and it's a scenario that this druid is just trying to protect its territory, and maybe there's something else. So, all right, I didn't kill you, but I in compensation for you still having your life, you will do a task for me, or now the added more wolves because you're in this thing's den. We'll just eat you, and what have you. So like you can change that, like you can.
Like, even like having fun with that, like, it turns out they weren't wolves, they were werewolves, and you all have lycanthropy now, and you're part of this werewolf clan, right? Whether you like it or not. Or
Yeah.
and so what happens there becomes a political game within the werewolf clan, as they try and like assert their dominance and find their place, and kind of like regain control of their lives. That they want to be cured, that they revel in this new world they found. Which direction is it going to go?
So you've got so many ways to bend and twist your story, and you don't necessarily have to like figure it out. Like, all right, well, if it's the first encounter of the evening, and the party does something stupid and they all die, okay, the campaign's not over, guys, but I need 10 minutes. And we've talked about the DM break on many different videos, Or you could even, go crazy and be like, all right, well, you guys want to keep the story going. It's pitch time. The DM sits down, crosses their fingers, and everybody at the table gets to kind of narrate, what do you think happens here? And the DM either picks and chooses or combines different story elements from what each of the player does. Because you know me, I love player agency. I love, players being given the power to kind of add some narration to the story. So sure. And once the DM kind of comes up with where the story is going to go, they can go back into narration mode of like, okay, you come to, and this is the first thing you see. This is what you smell. Re-evoke the senses. Bring about the pain of where they've been injured, but you're alive. And now we take the story and move in this new direction, and it can be a lot of fun to kind of deal with this. And maybe it's a slight hiccup in your overall plot, or as the case with like Lycanthropy or a werewolf game, like, all right, everything is now rewritten, forget all what's happened past, now we have this new thing to worry about, nothing else is going to happen until all of this is now decided. So it can be a whole story rewrite, and the players get to keep playing. So I think most of them are going to be like, all right, let's deal with this, whatever this new story is.
So that's the combat pillar, right? And there's just so many different directions you can go with that. It's as varied as the enemies that your players will encounter in the game. Right?
Absolutely.
So now let's look at the exploration, right? And I feel like
that's where you would go.
I feel like the biggest example you can pull from modern fantasy, or even classic fantasy, is Tolkien with Lord of the Rings. And it's like they can't get through the past, now they have to go through the mines of Moria, right? Like that one, like, and that might be a simple, like, oh, we found this one check, right? And now we have to make a detour, right? And look what, like, if you look at what that detour meant for them, it was literally a dungeon delve where they end up in a running combat, and they do lose a major member of their party, through Indeed. That all. And also we saw what could happen to someone in defeat, after they technically lost or died to a monster.
Indeed.
There's no need. You don't have to do that in your D&D game. But if you wanted to do something cool, like some kind of resurrection, or someone was saved for a particular reason, there's no reason why you couldn't do that.
So when I look at failure in the exploration pillar, I think that is a perfect example, Dave, using the narration of trying to get across the mountains, and it just doesn't happen. But if you look at the other aspect of the exploration pillar, and that's looking for information. A lot of times it's like, okay, you're going to a location to try and find the information. And if you get there and you fail to acquire it, well, sometimes it's just, okay, well, somebody else has to roll. A lot less fun. But it could very well be all right, we need this information. And if this library doesn't have it, if this castle doesn't have it, whatever it is that you're looking for,
Ted, are you going
to have to go?
Are you going to tell me that your piece of information's in another castle?
In another castle. You caught my nerdy reference before I could even deliver it. Excellent.
Yeah.
So it's a scenario of, like, especially if you're dealing with an element where, like, time is a factor. It could be a situation of, like, all right, do we keep looking here, or do we go to another location? And like, the players have to give this, and that's another aspect of failure of time thing, time limits. And what do you do? When do you decide, all right, I've just got to move forward with the information I have, because I can't I can't take the time to go do these other things.
Now,
so
some of you aren't going to like this, but in your example, we're trying to locate a piece of information.
Hmm.
Say it's a lost tomb. They have to find the tomb, infiltrate the tomb, get to the secret chamber in the tomb that has said information. But they fail to do the thing that actually delivers the information.
Hmm.
You could just say, they just don't have the ability to garner it. Or, this is the part that some of you may hate. What if instead someone else got the information first and took it with them, and they do have clues in order to figure that out, but now they have to track down that individual that has what they need, and maybe it just became a lot more costly for them to get what they want.
Right.
Because in our games, we are very big proponents of, like, nothing is set in stone and written until it is, right?
Right.
Like,
100%.
Instead of just dead ending, where they needed to go and keep them from getting the thing that they did, to me it'd be far more interesting. Go, like, how can we turn this into more adventure? How can we get more quest hooks out of this? How can we make the players interact with the world more and with other NPCs? Um, and it might mean changing on the fly why they failed to obtain what they're doing. It's not because they didn't have the skill sets they needed. No, it's because now someone else was there already and took what they needed, and you
I
let them find clues.
I'm a big proponent, and I see this a lot in a lot of streamed games, that couples with that thought exactly of, um, nothing is written until it's written. I feel like a lot of DMs out there allow the dice to be as big a part of the story. So when you roll and you come up a failure, you then have to ascertain, well, why did you fail? Was the information never there? Was the information, as Dave is suggesting, uh, been taken, so it's not here any longer, or did you just not find it? And as the DM, a lot of times, like, you have to answer these questions, and sometimes very quickly. So the improv and on the fly style GMing that we've become very accustomed to is making a lot of snap decisions and having to take some power notes while you're gaming, so that you can be able to put the pieces of the puzzle that's coming together while the game is active. Can be a lot of fun. So when you have that, I have failed to acquire the information. 1/3 of that is, well, it's not there. Well, if this is the only place to get the information, that kind of dead ends this aspect of the story. How do you proceed forward if you need this? So you can't dead end the story. So that becomes not an element. So it's got to be,
And we
well,
know
you have to
because
go somewhere else.
we've absolutely have done this to ourselves.
Oh, completely. And it's like, all right, well, you don't have it. I I can recall a time where the players were tracking down a villain. They were in a room, they were doing an investigation check, and sorry, they were looking for what had to be a secret entrance. And I knew it was there. And as soon as the word started to leave my mouth, like, I wanted to just, like, bite them back and be like, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But like, all right, make an investigation check. And Dave's brother Ryan rolls the die, gets a 9. And I'm like, the frick do I do with a 9? So I had the wherewithal, and I'm super thankful that I'm like, all right, it takes a while, but you find, and there was a book that was a lever, and it of course moved the bookcase, and they were able to go after this villainous character. But as soon as I started talking, like, I knew, stop talking. Don't say this. This is not a good idea.
uh,
Because if I made them make a roll, that failure meant the story doesn't progress here. And like, I've talked about this moment numerous times. It was in my Curse of Narcotis game. It's on the channel somewhere. I think if you go look for it, I don't even remember whereabouts in the game it was, but it was was one of those things that it was definitely a on the fly teaching moment for me as a GM of like, all right, I need to be more careful about asking for roles if failure is an aspect of it that you don't want. Um, so you have to sometimes, bend and twist what failure means. And in this case, for an investigation check, you can find it, but it takes a long time to do. And that's what I had, like they're like, okay, you guys are touching every book and pulling everything, and eventually get there, but it takes about 90 minutes or whatever the time frame it was. And I vaguely recall like it was more than an hour. Um, but I hated that moment.
We got a question from Zargon.
Zargon, wow.
What's each of your biggest failures as a player and or DM? Bloodthirsty Ted kicked into a tree by a giant, or Dave and friends TPK'd on Saver Dice. Dude, I don't even remember the TPK. It was so many games ago.
Well,
I remember we made a. I think me and Cody made a video about it, and I thought it was pretty funny. So I never regret a TPK in a game. I don't regret my character deaths. I don't care about that stuff. To me they're kind of funny. It's the game
so
aspect.
I definitely feel that, my night of Tulba Thagonar being kicked into a tree by a giant was definitely, a failing as me of a player. I don't know what was going on in my life, but I was having a very bloodthirsty night. My character was an undead slayer, and I was just ready for combat no matter what was out there. And Dave was not having a combat night. Everything was, social and interaction, and it was a different time. And, nowadays I'm like, all right, is it possible to talk our way out of this? Is it possible to, do this other thing?
And I'm like, no, Ted, I am not absolutely not thinking tonight. There will be blood.
So, I don't know if that's my biggest failure as a player. I mean, as a DM, I know I've made lots of mistakes, as a lot of DMs, do out there. Um, but I mean, that's, as we said at the beginning, that's how we learn. If you don't fail, how are you going to acknowledge, what you did wrong to get better? Um, so I look at these things and I'm like, all right, yeah. So I've had a number of characters that have done some stupid things, said some stupid things. Um, you know,
I
the two characters that, had like Matoya, who died in a total TPK in the we went too far too late at night. He was a throwaway character. Like I remember the name, but I don't remember. He might have been a swashbuckler.
yeah.
It's 3.5 days. Wasn't anyone that like, I hearken back to as, one of my favorite characters of all time. Grevin, the first TPK, the beardless Psionicist dwarf for second edition that died. He, mechanically, he was a very interesting character, and that campaign was a very, very fun game. And nowadays, you could not recreate who Grevin the Beardless one was, because we don't have proper psionics, and even when they have psionic options, none of them could do the things that he did.
None of them are broken enough to recreate that character.
And every aspect of the thing that made Grevin fun to play in combat are all concentration, and you can't have 3 concentration factors all stacking together. So he's just, there in loving memory. And I've got a nice I will jump up here and grab, because one amazing Nerdarchy fan actually, made my dark dwarf or gray dwarf psionicist with animal affinity, with a scorpion, and presented it to me. So it was a very, very treasured piece in my minis collection. um you know so him dying was certainly a sad element, but that was another night of just brutal choices and people jumping into lava, and the fighter or thief that gets poisoned to death by a quasit or an imp, whatever it was. it was bad. It was a bad night for all of us.
Poison was much worse back then. So before I get into my greatest failure, and then we move on to, how to turn failures in the
Social pillar.
social pillar of the game into something more interesting. We're at the halfway mark, so again, we're going to mention that we are going to rerun the Kickstarter we just failed at. We are going to restructure some things. We're looking at ways to mitigate some of the costs to lower our goal, and some different marketing things we're going to try. So go check that out. You can sign up and get on to the watch page so you get notified when we drop the Kickstarter. We did early bird specials on the last one. I imagine we're going to do them on this one, but we'll try and make them better. Or something. We're still examining that failure and dissecting it. But go check that out. Also, as you can see, the scroll on the screen, also on the overlay, this stream is powered by Easy Roller Dice. They've been sponsors of the channel since almost the beginning. We've been with them for a very long time. And there's a promo code down in the description to get 25% off your first purchase of Easy Roller Dice. So go check them out.
So when we look at the social pillar, there are many different aspects of why you.
Well, let me answer Zaragon's question first.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
And then we'll move on to that. All right, so back to Zaron's questions. What's each of you's biggest failures as a player and with DM? Bloodthirsty, Ted kicked into a tree by a giant. Dave and friends TPK'd in Sabor Dice. God, I don't even remember which group got TPK'd, but it was a lot of fun either way. Nothing in game, right? It's not an in-game thing, right? That I would look back at and go and regret those mistakes, those failures. It's just part of playing the game to me. Sometimes you make good choices, sometimes you make bad choices. If anything, it would probably be me being an asshole as a person in our earlier gaming years and being kind of abrasive. I know it's shocking to some of you. But yes, I could be much more abrasive and a bit of an asshole at times. And the time our friend Matt ran a game it was his first time. And we were so brutal and mean to him as a GM because it was his first game. He was nervous. He's running a pre-written adventure or module. He had to modify it.
To be fair, we only ever did homebrew stuff, and it was kind of alien for us to be running, something pre-written. I had never done it before, and really I hadn't even considered that was an option. And yeah, I will double down on Dave here. This was a bad move. This was absolutely a failure of us as people more than just players.
It was not good. So we were very it was the 80s, it was the late early 90s. And we were not the people we are today, and we were very mean to Matt, and he did not deserve that. We should have been far more encouraging than we were, and our boredom and frustration we took out on him, and I think we may have kicked him out of the DM chair halfway through that evening.
We absolutely did, and there is nothing wrong with DMs, especially new DMs, straight up reading flavor text out of the things. Even if you say, "Oh, the players see," it's okay. You can deal with that. But
we did not afford him the grace he deserved. So.
No. But he's moved on. I don't think he is sitting there, sulking at night of they were mean to me, all those years ago.
He's planning his revenge. He's just gonna.
He moved states away, but
not because of that game, other reasons.
Other reasons. As his wife got a really good job, but I mean him and his wife are my daughter's godparents, so we are still friendly. It's definitely not a all right, well, He hates us all.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
but
I would look more towards things like that in my all my years of gaming. Be like, oh, I couldn't have been better player, or DM perhaps, but I could have been a better person. So
that that would have been an element where, like, before session 0 really was a thing, like this could have been a, okay guys, this is the adventure that we're doing. Oh, Dave, Ted, and Steve, I see you're playing all dwarves. Well, the first NPC you're going to meet is a goblin. This is not something that you'd be like, oh, I hate all goblins, I'm going to go attack it. And that's something that we wanted to do, and we're told you're not allowed to do that. You know, but I digress.
so so that was it.
We were
So Jay Harmless has a question in the chat that I feel like we must address.
sure.
Will Nerdarchy Dave ever wear a 1920s outfit that's as cool as Ted's was recently? Now, I can't say for sure that me discussing my comic collection will be anticlimactic. It ends with me selling it for trucks. No, so PAX Unplugged, we kind of went guerrilla style to promote our Zoo Mafia game, and I had the thought, but I had it too late, and I was like, we really should have gone to PAX Unplugged dressed as Zoo Mafia, as the Zoo Mafia, and that would be complete with 1920 suits. Might have been a little bit on the furry side, but
Yeah, I mean, there was a
and we're not furries,
board.
but a lot of associations have been made between that game and furries. But also, I feel like if you dress as an animal in clothes, that kind of is furry territory, no matter how you do it.
Yeah, I did for a small time wear a pair of cat ears. I don't think I still have them down here. Um, there was a board game that was talking about like cats in cubicles or something along those lines, and if you play tested their game, you could take a pair of cat ears. So I was totally walking around with the cat ears. Um, I dig dressing up. I've dressed up for most of the games for Zoo Mafia, here on the channel, because I find it's a little fun. So I've got a growing collection of old hats. I've got the like the Newsies slanted cap. I've got a bowler. I've got a I don't remember all the names because I'm bad at fashion. But
Especially archaic fashion.
But I've got a handful of things, and I like to
Oh
do it
no,
up.
that's not the problem. I feel like you're pretty good with archaic fashion. 1920s might be too modern
Oh. Well, whatever. But like, so I picked up a pair of suspenders, a white button-down shirt, and a hat is all I wear for the stream these days. But it's fun. At PAX Unplugged, I wore a gothic tailcoat that I got online over the summer, and decided to change things up. I was gonna wear a different jacket on the Saturday of PAX Unplugged, but for some reason in my kerfuffle of changing some things around in my house, I totally lost my garment bag that had my extra jacket in it, my Nerdarchy armor, and I didn't find that until PAX Unplugged was over. So the new coat was what I had to wear regardless. Not that I was planning to wear the armor, but even if I wanted to, I couldn't. But it has been found. That would have been a real shame to have lost that.
Yeah. Well, maybe next year we'll switch it up, and I'll borrow the armor and wear the armor if I lose like 30 pounds.
Well, I think it's got lacing, so you can adjust if need.
Oh wow, we can go to fat boy proportions.
I wasn't gonna go there, my friend. I was just gonna say you could loosen it up a little bit.
I was looking at some of the pictures from Gen Con and from PAX Unplugged. I'm like, oh my god, Jesus Christ, you're so fat.
I don't know. I ran into a friend who's like, "Hey, have you lost weight?" So
there you go. Stress of not having a job.
But we got 15 minutes left, so let's talk about failing with some social encounters. And before like we get deep into it, I want to say that failure can sometimes be more than just rolling poorly on the dice. Because sometimes when we get into social encounters, dice might not even be used. If you say the right thing or the wrong thing to an NPC, it can automatically be a success or automatically be a failure just by word choice. uh but sometimes you have to also like, okay, well, we're going to do a persuasion check here. And I think the biggest element that I look at here has to be interpreting the dice. And sometimes that means uh changing what or how it's been said. Because if there is an element where, or there's an incident where I had wanted to make a persuasion check or an intimidation check, social encounter. I wanted somebody to give us information, and we were playing a Dark Sun-esque game. I was a Thrycreen. Thrycreen, they eat people. It's no big deal to them. And there was a prisoner, and I told her straight up, I will eat your children. And the DM had me make an intimidation check. Well, I was a warrior type character, therefore I did as I did a lot of times back then, and I dumped charisma. So I dropped like a 7 on the die, -1. That's a 6. And like at that time, I was frustrated at the GM that it's like, well, why should I have rolled here? Shouldn't this be a big enough threat? But that's not for me to make that check. That's not for me to make that decision. That's the DM's job. So looking back to that scene with more experience, both as a DM and as a player, I've had to like rewrite that scene in my mind. Perhaps I was frothing at the mouth. Maybe I didn't speak it in as good a comment as I should have. And maybe she had no idea what I actually said. Ah, children. Okay, I failed to intimidate or persuade her in any way, shape, or form. And the conversation moved on, and I didn't, keep the element going. So like that's how I've rewritten that scene, because
there's a couple ways
fighter Thrycreen.
There's a couple ways you can handle that, and it kind of it kind of like goes along with what we're talking about, right? Like in that case, you're just like, I'm role playing and I just said some shit, and the GM is like, that sounds like you're trying to intimidate them. Let's see if they're actually scared or not, right? And one way of doing that, like you said, is like, oh well, this is what maybe I was so excited that I butchered my comment, or another is like, or maybe could have went a different route. Like this is what I was trying to say, but like with kind of like not necessarily a retcon, but this is what actually this is what I intend. What I told you what I intended, but after the roll, here's what actually happened, right? And then right. You could do something with that and role play what you think might be something that would cause you to fail, whether it is just like you speak poor common, or you completely say something different. Like, I'll take your kids to the park, but you say it like real angrily. They weren't impressed. So yeah. Then the other thing too is for any kind of like, I just remember like you and Ryan had a great argument that I think we might have cut out of a video over this very topic of role playing, and then role playing with the right. dice, where it's like, oh, you should roll the dice first and then RP the result, or you should role play and then take it from there, and and you guys had very different opinions on that.
Sure. And again, even then, like that, this was very early on, in Nerdarchy's history of when this happened. And Ryan and I have, we've been gaming together for decades. So it's a scenario where like sometimes players, who both play and GM, have different philosophies. And whoever is in the GM chair, you have to give them the respect. And it kind of goes back to how we mistreated Matt. I wasn't giving Ryan the respect, and I didn't have the knowledge as a player to say, well, I need to change what this scene looks like.
Yeah.
And, and I don't think Ryan reinterpreted things as the GM to say, well, how did this really look like? So yeah, we've debated, and I admit I was fully wrong there. The GM called for a roll, I failed. Story has to be rewritten to interpret what has been done, and not just like, oh well, this was my intention, but maybe that's not what came out, and I'm okay with that. Now,
So, what are some of your thoughts on using failures in social situations in the social pillar to kind of advance the story, change the story?
So I think like if you begin looking at like political games, or games of espionage and intrigue, like social failures have the ability to kind of increase or decrease social statuses. um you know Bless you. When I look to the little D&D retreat that we went on, we played a game that entirely was political. We only had essentially like this you know social power. I don't even remember what our stat was called. And
It was like
you
influence or
know
something, or it started
it
with an
might
R.
have been influence. I think we talked about it in the video where, well, we talked about it. But it was a scenario where, like, in that game, literal failure lowered your influence. And if you were doing it against somebody who was the same as you, their influence would grow. So, like, I was getting more powerful as the game went on while I was defeating my adversary. So it was an amusing situation to really, play up and play around with. Um, but so like if you're gonna make social checks against people in the bar and fail, well, maybe you get a nasty reputation and you're not welcome there anymore. Or maybe you have some kind of poor etiquette when you're visiting the king, and you forget to do whatever the proper social greeting is. And you're not given an invitation to you know the next soiree, the next party, the next big thing. And you were really counting on that to be able to, fix your influence and get better standing. Um, but I mean, it could also be, beyond loss of the community. It could be, loss of opportunity. Well, maybe they're going to give the job that, you were really hoping for to somebody else. And by job, I mean like mission of like, oh, go off and fetch this thing for this really, important noble that's coming to town. Um, so like there's loss associated with it without legit punishment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you don't really like. You don't have to. There doesn't have to be punishment per se. It could, it just like the consequences of not being successful. Exist, right? Like things are gonna get harder because of you didn't succeed if you're still trying to do the thing, right? It's going to take extra effort on your part, extra convincing. Um, like I kind of think of your campaign that you ran, and you know there was an NPC that my character was trying to befriend, and it like
Mm-hmm.
took him a long time to befriend him.
Yeah,
Like, but he kind
sure.
of just kept failing forward until like he wore down this NPC's resolve, essentially, uh,
I,
and,
I
and made him look
I
deeper.
I still love Anna Lassalar, and part of me wishes that I could, put a new campaign back in Griffin Gaff and see what that looks like. Because I mean, even if I progress the story 100 to 200 years, Anna Lassalar was not some ancient elf. He could still be around. And again, I could still move the story 200 years, and Uthengar could still be around too.
Yeah.
So like there's elements that um, you know, you can play with and bring out those characters again. But when I look at those failing forward moments, you took that dwarven persistence of like, no, I am not going to allow this guy to live the stereotype. And as you decided you were going to make that there, I made the change of, okay, there's going to be the opportunity. The guy at the front, you're not changing his opinion, but we're going to see how long this takes for you to develop this kinship, this friendship with Anna Lassalar. And as you proved your worth as not so much warrior, but with your knowledge and your spell casting, he was like, all right, this is not the typical dwarf. I mean, not many dwarves decide to delve into wizardry. So he decided to, give you the benefit of the doubt. And maybe there was some elven stoicism where maybe he liked you a little bit more than he was showing on. Um, but when you have the ability to kind of stretch that out, it I think it was like it became very memorable for both of us to kind of build this camaraderie between these two characters. So I thought it was a lot of fun.
Also, too, just like failure is a general topic. Like, how can you have that like heroic arc of failing and then having trying to succeed later on, which is like it's a common trope. So why wouldn't you want to have that in D&D? But in this case, it's going to be because of gameplay, and then you have to kind of take a step back and say, well, what does this failure mean? How can it be overcome? How can they have their training montage to to get to the next level and solve this problem? I realized we didn't even touch on the failure from the DM's perspective, the plan failure, right? Which could be
Sure.
part of that with 3 minutes left.
So I'll dive in real quick. We've talked about this on the channel before, but I ran a game. It was
Ghost Walk.
Ghost Walk. Thank you. And I had this amazing thing set up where I'm like, all right, the players are going to make their characters, and then I'm going to kill them, and then they're going to get into the Ghost Walk.
So
and
Ghost
I wanted
Walk
it to be a surprise.
was a campaign in third edition, or was it AD&D?
Third.
In third
Third.
edition, where you played as undead, basically, right? Like different versions.
You're essentially a spirit in the ethereal plane, if you will.
Yeah.
And the concept I had of like, oh well, I'm gonna put them in this moment where they died, and then they're gonna go off and gain more power as ghosts, and they're gonna find a way to come back to life and reappear in the moment where they died, where now they're more powerful than their foes and they're going to win, and that's them coming back. But I number one, everybody that we gamed with was one of these things that like they knew about the book, so it's not like it was a big shocker. Ted is not a brutal DM. I don't seek out the kill unless there's something going on. So as I'm taking turns and these guys are, as the player characters are being cut down one by one, the tension that I wanted to create just wasn't there. They were like, all right, I guess we just have to go through this. And it was like, it was ruined. So the failure for me was I should have said, hey guys, I'm interested in doing a Ghost Walk game. What do you is that an interest to you? And then like we could have talked about it, come up with the story together, created the moment together of this is where we died. And all the kerfuffle that was like multiple sessions leading up to this fight were for nothing. And we could have started right there as them. Okay, you describe how you die, and now you're in Ghost Walk, and the story would have been amazing, and everybody would have had a fun. But I wanted to do my whole surprise thing, and it didn't work.
Yeah, that stuff is so hard, and players just can smell it. When you start trying to force something on
Mm-hmm.
them, and then they become frustrated instead of being this cool reveal. And there's so many times that's happened in various games. So really, the moral to the story is whenever you want to plan something like that, you're much better off just narrating it than
Yes.
making them believe they have a choice or an option. Um, and also, like, you got to know your players to understand how they're going to react to this, if they're going to be cool with it. And if you can, in addition to narrating this stuff to them, if you can find ways to bring them in to part of the narration, I think you'll also find it'll go a lot further as well.
But tying all of that into tonight's concept, failure is a learning process, and as players, as GMs, as people, we learn through our failures, and we have the ability to improve and get better in life by seeing the failures of ourselves and the failures of others, and say, well, how can I do better the next time out there? So related to that, not off to the Kickstarter that didn't fund. We're not done with it. We're gonna have another go in 2024. We're gonna bring that funding goal down, and we're gonna make it happen this time so that we can bring Zoo Mafia out to all those
We're preparing
interested
our
people out
training
there.
our training montage as we speak. So,
Indeed.
all right, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back Tuesday night with some Zoo Mafia. Come check us out, and until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.